discovery, we're up to principle 15. Principle 15 is to take the belief which is embraced by the world and look in the opposite direction. In this opposite direction, much truth lies hidden. Now, the trouble with almost everybody, including scientists and people that are supposed to be on the cutting edge of everything, is a lot of them don't do this. They just push the boundaries of the direction that everything's going in and do more of it. But the really great thinkers of the world, like Galileo, Newton, Einstein, Tesla, Lincoln, the people that really made their marks on history didn't just go with the flow. They looked where the flow was, and then they said, well, let's look where nobody else is looking. And so when they looked where nobody else was looking, then they often found great truths. This is particularly true about Galileo. Everybody in his day, all the people that called themselves scientists, and most of them worked for the Vatican at the time and were in cooperation with the Vatican, believed the Earth was the center of the universe. This was pretty much it. And so Galileo thinks, well, let's build a telescope and just see if the Earth is the center of the universe. It may not be. Maybe the truth is the opposite of what everybody's thinking. So Galileo looks up there and builds this telescope and looks at Jupiter, and he sees these little moons circling around Jupiter, and he looks at them over time, and he finds these moons are going right around the planet. And so he figures, well, this is probably happening all over the solar system. And then his observations shows phases of Venus. And these observations prove that the sun is the center, not the Earth. We as the Earth are going around the sun. And that was a total opposite of the way everybody was thinking. And he had proof through his telescope, through his observations, that could prove that this was true. And he went to the Vatican scientists, and they didn't want to accept that. And he says, well, just look through my telescope and you can see the proof. And they refused to even look through the telescope. So they did not want to see the proof. Now, why didn't they want to see the proof? Because, you know, when people have a certain idea in their minds, and it's almost part of their religion, it's very painful for them to have that belief shattered. I mean, a lot of people would rather die. There's been a lot of people burned at the stake because they refuse to even consider their belief may be wrong. And of course, a lot of people have been burned at the stake and persecuted for doing the right thing, but also there's been a lot of people suffering needlessly because of the wrong beliefs as well as the right beliefs. But if you have a wrong belief, it's very difficult to just say I was wrong. Just thinking that you're wrong, admitting you're wrong, is sometimes harder than giving your life for a cause. Some people would rather give their life for a cause than admit that they were wrong. But the reason very few people are willing to take what everybody else is thinking and look in the wrong direction, because we tune in to the group life. And just like the individual life doesn't want to admit he's wrong, it's always really nice to be right. especially if you're having a heated argument or anything. When have you ever had a heated argument that all of a sudden you presented a fact and the other guy says, boy, you know, I guess I was wrong? Has anyone even had that happen once in their life? How about you, Curtis? You ever have that happen? You've had a lot of arguments. You ever had that happen just even once?
No, not even once, especially with my family. They've all been vaccinated. I'm the only one that hasn't, but I don't feel the need to. And boy, they think I'm wrong. And there's nothing I can say. I can indicate, you know, well, take this one medicine. It's doing wonders around the world. And oh, it is not. It's just a horse wormer. You want people to take a dang horse wormer. What a dumb idea that is. So, you know, there's nothing. So I just let them think what they want.
Yeah.
But there's no, you know, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Yeah, so we as individuals, like Curtis says, and never once in his life has he had an argument, and Curtis loves to argue, but never once in his life has he been in the midst of an argument presenting facts, and the other guy says, well, yeah, I know that fact is really correct. I guess I was wrong.
Well, their minds aren't open. Their minds are closed. Like when you started introducing higher doctrines, you know, beyond the Mormon Church, I was very receptive. I was open. At that point, anything that would quicken my mind. I was waiting for my mind to be quickened by the church, and it just wasn't. It was flat.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when you presented some arguments for, oh, where the church might be out of order a little bit, or you know, some of the things we talked about, I thought, there's a quickening going on.
Yeah.
It was a good stimulation.
But the interesting principle here is, as individuals, we just don't like to admit we're wrong, especially if we have some investment. Now, if you don't have much investment in the idea, if something you read in the paper, you discuss with somebody and somebody says, no, I read something else contrary. Well, you don't have a lot of investment there. So you might say, well, maybe that paper was wrong then. But if you have a big investment in it, like believing in a religion or believing in a doctrine that's supposed to come from God or whatever, if you have a big investment in it, it's pretty traumatic to discover you're wrong or to be faced with facts that reveal you're wrong. But what's interesting is we also have a group life. And we have the group life of the city, the state, the nation as a whole, and then the world, humanity as a whole. And the group life also does not want to admit it's wrong. For instance, on some of the issues of the day, like global warming, the virus, how we're dealing with everything, the economy, there's certain group beliefs of the group life about these things. And when you challenge any of them, the group life turns on you and tries to diminish or destroy or prove wrong anything that challenges the belief of the group life. And this is what Galileo did. He challenged the group thinking of the group life. The group life thought the earth was the center of the universe. And when he presented proof that it wasn't, they did not want to accept it. It took quite a while before Galileo's proof was finally accepted, because other scientists around the world began to make their own telescopes and make observations, and they saw that Galileo was right. The earth, with their own eyes, they could see the earth was not the center of the universe. And eventually enough people came forth with evidence that even the group life had to change its mind. And the group life once thought the world was flat, and it took a lot of changing evidence. They had to sail around the world before people started to change their mind on that idea. And so the group life has this mindset that just think of somebody you've argued with that you presented proof that they're wrong, and then transfer that to the group life. The group life is the same way. We have certain things, and the media promotes the ideas that's believed in by the group life. So if you want to find greater truth, though, you look at what the group life has in its mindset as being true and look in the opposite direction. There you will find often new truth revealed. And this is what the great minds of the world has always done. The great discoveries hasn't happened by just going along and doing whatever, believing what everybody else believes and doing what everybody else does. The great discoveries are happen because innovative individual looks at what's going on and then looks in the opposite direction. And there you will discover much truth. Now, many spend their lives in study and they just go along with the groupthink. Now, groupthink is not always wrong, is the thing. There's certain things that the group mind has correct. So we can't just be black and white and just rule out everything that society as a whole or the group mind believes is incorrect. Like, say, we all believe that we should be protected by law from thieves and robbers and rapists, murderers. There's certain basic things that the group mind does accept that it's correct on. And the group mind is slowly evolving for humanity. But one thing this virus has showed us is that you look at the group mind for your country and it's quite similar to the world. The whole world has this same mindset about how to approach the virus and what's acceptable and what isn't. So we have what this virus has done is kind of illustrated to us a group mind that's embracing the whole world in a way that we've never really seen before. Because even the nations that are kind of antagonistic toward each other, like us and China and Russia, they're all have a lot of a similar mindset as to the approach of this virus, and all of the powers that be in all the world is kind of taking all the power they can to themselves to take advantage of this. So the virus is like an opportunity to give the powers that be more power over the individual. And this is materializing all over the world, especially right now in Australia. Everybody, we've always seen the Australians as being really independent, especially after watching the movie Crocodile Dundee. We think, boy, those Australians are really independent, but they just stand up for themselves. But they're having a really rough time. The authorities are really coming down on them hard there with this virus. So even in nations that are considered occupied by very independent sort of people, they're all kind of embracing this idea of increasing authority right now. And so what the lights of the world have to do is look the opposite direction. What can we do to increase individual authority, individual power, not the power that's over us, but the power that's over us should work at enhancing our individual and our group power rather than taking power to itself and away from us. Because where there's freedom and freedom of thought, there's always more light and more progress. And there will always be problems that develop, but where there's freedom, the problems will be solved quicker than if freedom is diminished. Okay, another really interesting example of looking the opposite direction was in the mid 19th century. The doctors did not believe in washing hands before surgery or anything like that. There was some people had theories that there was little maybe germs or something out there, but everybody thought that was a really crazy idea. And there was no need for cleanliness or washing hands because, well, little dirt didn't hurt anybody. That's the way they looked at it in those days. But there was a Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis, and he was working with delivering babies and stuff in the hospital where he was, and he figured, a lot of these women are getting infections. So he started implementing washing hands before dealing with any surgery or anything. And when he started doing this, the amount of infection rate went way down. I mean, it was dramatic evidence that washing hands did something. They didn't know what germs were in those days, but he come out to the conclusion that washing hands was correct, and so he started promoting washing hands. Other physicians thought he was crazy because how could washing hands do anything? There's nothing on the hands that's going to create any problem. And so this guy was persecuted and made fun of and fired, and eventually the powers that be put him in a mental hospital where he died within a few weeks after he was in a sane asylum. And poor guy. But then, of course, a short time later, evidence was out that the guy was correct. And so the poor guy had to give his life for promoting an idea that went contrary to groupthink, went completely contrary, and he had to wind up giving his life to try to put that truth on the line. Right now, washing hands is just a no-brainer. It's part of the groupthink right now, and it's part of the correct groupthink that we need to wash hands whenever we're in danger of spreading germs or anything. But it's interesting that just not that long ago, people just thought washing hands was just a crazy idea. Okay, any comments on what we've covered so far?
Yeah, there's a whole group thought around death. You've got to die at 80 or 90 or 100 or whatever. Imagine a couple years, 100 years from now, when people are living to be 300, they'll look back and they'll say, boy, look how people used to think, that whole mindset. So, what if we open the portal for life extension? That's what I've been thinking about. That's what I wrote a book about, is shattering that whole thought process that you have to die at a certain age. Overcoming death is really a possibility, or prolonging life. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Let's just look at one thing. We'll look at some facts on global warming that goes against the graying. The group mindset on global warming is it's extremely dangerous, and every time there's a hurricane or drought somewhere, this is global warming, this is where we're headed, this is cause we're facing doom. But this is from an article in the Wall Street Journal by one of my favorite scientists named Bjørn Lomborg. He's from Denmark, I believe, Annie's territory. And let me just read you a few facts that he presented. Now, these facts go against the mindset, but they are still facts. He says, take the recent flooding in Germany and Belgium. They've had a lot of flooding there. It's all been blamed on global warming, and everyone there is saying global warming is going to produce a lot more floods. He says many, including German Chancellor Merkel, are blaming it on climate change. Yet a new study in more than 10,000 rivers around the world shows that most rivers now flood less. What used to be a 50-year flood in the 1970s appears every 152 years today, likely due to urbanization, flood control measures, and changes in climate. So what they've done is, in a certain part of the world, there were more floods than normal. So they say, well, this is global warming, where the whole world is flooding more. Well, what he did is he looked at the whole world and found out it was actually flooding less overall. So you just can't take a little pocket of the world where something is happening and saying this is happening all around the world. It's not. Now, concerning the fires, we've all heard about these fires in California that, boy, this is global warming and it's creating disaster. Here's what he says. Despite breathless climate reporting in 2021, the burn areas to date is the fourth lowest of the past 11 years. The area that burned in 2020 was only 11% of the area that did in the early 1900s, 11%. Contrary to climate cliches, annual global burned area has declined since 1900 and continues to fall. So, yeah, we had some bad fires in California, but what he's looking at is the whole globe, and the whole globe since 1900, burn areas have declined, which is pretty fascinating. Then he says this: we have data on global deaths from climate-related weather disasters such as floods, droughts, storms, and fire from the International Disaster Database. In the 1920s, these disasters killed almost 500,000 people on average each year. Now, the current climate narrative would suggest that natural disasters are deadlier than ever, but he says this is not true. Over the past century, climate-related deaths have dropped to fewer than 20,000 average deaths a year, even though the global population has multiplied by 4 since 1920. So in the 1920s, 500,000 people died a year with climate-related deaths. Now it's only 20,000. And by comparison, since there was only 25% the number of people, 500,000 would have been comparison to like 2 million. So 2 million versus 20,000. So we're not suffering nearly as much with climate-related deaths. Okay, adjusted to a full year, climate-related weather disasters could cause about 6,000 deaths in 2021. With greater wealth and technology advancement, we no longer see 500,000 or even 18,000 lives lost to climate-related weather disasters, but 6,000. So according to study, temperature increases over the past 2 decades in the US and Canada caused about 7,200 more heat deaths a year. But the study also shows that warming prevents 21,000 deaths from cold. Okay, so what we're experiencing is a little over 7,000 deaths related to global warming, but 21,000 deaths related to being too cold. So globally, the study shows that climate change annually causes almost 120,000 additional heat deaths, but avoids 300,000 deaths from cold. So in other words, global warming has been saved lives rather than killed lives. And there's another benefit that people overlook, and that is the additional carbon dioxide added to the atmosphere has produced, carbon dioxide is actually a fertilizer, and it has greened the earth. They show that plants are now converting 31% more carbon dioxide into organic matter. And there's an increase in satellite images show an increase in the greening of the earth somewhere around 20% in the past 50 years or so. So there's, back, I remember back in the 60s and 70s, everyone was predicting there would be such food shortages and famine. Well, one of the things that's prevented that was additional carbon dioxide added to the earth produces more plant growth and more food. So that's been a good thing. Now, a few years ago, scientists were asked, what would be the ultimate beneficial temperature for the earth? And most of them come up with the idea that the earth would, the most beneficial temperature would be a couple of degrees warmer than it was at the time. So, so it's interesting the facts that come out here. So, but if you present things that go against the mindset, what everybody thinks, even though these are hardcore facts, but it's like Galileo presenting the facts to the Vatican. They do not want to hear, because the group mindset has so much investment in their beliefs about global warming that they don't want to hear the facts. Now, it is possible the earth would be, once it warms so much, then the results would be more negative than positive. But actually, according to what Lomborg is, the facts he relates, we haven't really got there yet. And what he suggests is, instead of spending a bunch of money trying to trillions of dollars, which would be do almost nothing to change the weather, is to put our investment into preparing for the changes that may occur. He suggests that would be a lot more productive use of our money. And as far as things that will check global warming and the emissions of carbon dioxide, I think in the next 50 years, even if the government does nothing, private industry is going to switch a lot to green energy. And we're also working on fusion. Once nuclear fusion is perfected, which will happen in the next 20 or 30 years, we're going to have a source of unlimited clean power. And it's just a matter of time before we have unlimited energy for the planet that will be non-polluting. Okay, any comment on that before we proceed to the next principle?
Don't you see a lot more nuclear energy taking place, introducing unlimited energy supplies in our country?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that the people that are big promoters of carbon-free energy are against the things that produce the most carbon-free energy. The biggest producer of carbon-free energy is nuclear. Produces,
Right.
it eliminates no carbon at all. And so, or no carbon dioxide. But they're against it. They're against more nuclear energy. They've been against it for 40 years, and nuclear energy would be clean, very economical power if it had been supported. But what the left has done, they've filed all kinds of lawsuits. Anytime somebody wants to create a nuclear plant in the United States, they're sued to death. The first nuclear plants we built in the United States were really cheap, and we built them just in a few months. And then a lot of people got the idea that they were dangerous, so they started lawsuits and promoted passing laws for increasing regulations. And so it multiplied the cost of building a nuclear plant about 10 times or more. And it also slowed it down. Instead of building one in 6 months, it took 10 years. And so it just really slowed down the progress of nuclear energy. Now, we've also got the technology to build what they call breeder reactors that can take nuclear waste and process that and get energy from it. And there's enough nuclear waste that we could power the country for 1,000 years. But they've been against even building those type of reactors. And then they, another very clean source, the secondary clean source is hydro, yet they want to tear down all the dams. So the question is, do these, are these people really concerned about this or not? Now, another source of very clean energy is natural gas. And natural gas, we get a lot of this, they're against fracking, which can produce natural gas. And gas produces half the carbon dioxide as coal or oil. So it's not perfect, but it's been, the addition of natural gas has helped the United States lower its carbon emissions quite a bit. So it's been very beneficial. But these guys that are worried about global warming are against natural gas and against fracking. So now a lot of them are even against solar. They have so many regulations. Where we build a solar plant, it's not supposed to disturb the environment. So they want all kinds of investigations, regulations that increases the price of even solar and wind. And so it's, and then there's a lot of people that don't want windmills in their backyard. And when somebody wants to put up a windmill, a bunch of windmills, they're often protested by the very people that are worried about global warming. So it's very, there's a lot in the way. So one of the things we want to ask the people with this mindset, where they're so worried about the apocalypse of global warming coming, is why are they against everything that will solve the problem? And nuclear energy alone could solve the problem. Now, I'm wondering if when they get this nuclear fusion developed, will they surface and protest nuclear fusion for some reason? It appears to be very clean, but maybe they'll worry that it's going to blow up or some crazy thing. But it seems like everything that comes out that can supply us with a good energy source, we have the people that's worried about global warming protesting it and being against it. So this is kind of typical throughout history. Throughout history, the group mindset has never been in 100% positive direction. And the innovative thinkers look at the group mindset and say, well, let's look at the opposite direction. How much truth is in the opposite direction? And quite often, quite a bit of truth is there. Okay, the next principle is, we won't have time to go into it, but it's principle 16. Put your attention on finding that which is true rather than finding that which is in error. Because we find a lot more truth by looking for truth than looking for what's wrong with everything. Okay, any comments or questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah, imagine how disturbing it would be to big business and the financial world if somebody came up with a nuclear cell, maybe this big, that would power your car, let's say for years, for practically nothing. I mean, that would disturb all of your current energy sources, and I mean, it would just wreak havoc. That's what got Nikola Tesla. I mean, he was working on a way to power people's homes for practically nothing through power waves. He'd already mastered radio waves, but look at how the opposition you would encounter if you came up with a way to power your car through nuclear fusion or fission.
There's people working on that. It's a possibility. Now, not everyone on the left is against good sources like nuclear energy. Bill Gates has a big investment in small nuclear reactors that company he's working with is planning on creating, that will be not have very little waste to it and be quite safe. And so there are people on both sides of the camp that are kind of following the logic, but a lot of people panicking just are against everything.
Well, that kind of technology already exists, but it would take an act of God to get it past the conglomerate that want to protect the status quo. That energy, it's called 0-point energy, and it already exists.
Okay, well, there's a lot of the good theories around it. I haven't heard of anyone actually having provable technology about it. Have you heard something about that, Ed?
Well, I've heard it from several places. I haven't seen it, but there's a lot of things that exist that are hidden. They're hidden because of the financial, global, military, and whatever else. But
yeah, there's been a lot of inventions that are very innovative but threaten the powers that be. So what has happened when they have materialized is, first of all, they try to buy the invention and then suppress it if it doesn't fit their mindset. If the guy refuses to sell, then he's persecuted. And there's a lot of innovative thinkers like Wilhelm Reich produced a device that produced kind of took healing energy out of the ethers, and he was having a lot of success healing people. And the powers that be went in and they arrested him, they threw him in jail, and they burned everything in connection with him. All his records, all his books, they actually burned them. You know, the government did. So that's and that happens to many innovators that refuse to sell out to the system. They have been attacked mercilessly. It's kind of sad, but eventually the truth gets exposed enough that it's undeniable. It eventually happens, but
Well, many of you have heard of Lockheed Skunk Works, and Ben Rich, who was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, after he retired, gave a talk to a graduating class at UCLA. And he said, we now have the technology to send ET home. He said that you've heard of the Star Wars and all this. He says, we've done that. He says, but it would take an act of God to get it out into the public use.
yeah, I've heard a lot about that we have a secret space system, but I would like to know the truth about that. It's kind of interesting.
I think if anyone would know, it'd be the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, which Ben Rich was, and they're the ones who developed it.
Yeah, it looks like it'd be pretty difficult to keep secret, but that's what they claim. Okay, any other comments before we wrap it up here? Well, we will be posting this lesson anyway. We missed the first part, but we'll make sure we get it recorded properly next week, and we will see you next Sunday at 2 p.m. all being well.
Hasta luego.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, everyone.